All right, so my name is Bryn Claypool. I am the current and previous director of PennApps, and I'm going to talk about logistics and crisis management and how we deal with it. So first of all, I don't know how many of you are familiar with PennApps, but we are one of the oldest college hackathons. We've been around for several years, so we have a lot of experience dealing with logistics and crisis management. We're having another event on Valentine's Day weekend, and we're expecting around 1,200 people, and we're going to house them in our engineering quad, which is one giant building with several interconnected buildings, and we're going to have people hacking all around the hallways. Okay, so before I get into logistics, I'm going to explain kind of how we're organized here at PennApps. We have me, the overlord, kind of overseeing everything. We have about 5-ish main committees: sponsorship, outreach, marketing, logistics, and stuff. Stuff is actually what most people would also put in logistics. We just have a couple guys who are really into just food and swag, so we just give them their own group and let them go at it. And then we have members from exec sitting at the top of all the different committees. And one point I want to make here is you guys shouldn't feel bound by anybody to organize your structure if you want to go for a very organized structure as like marketing, logistics, outreach, sponsorship. You know, if you have somebody who's really talented and needs their own committee, or you want to split it up in a different way, like go for it. It should really be driven by the people who are running the committees and not necessarily by what you think is the right way to structure it. Okay, so this is our logistics team. They're the superheroes of the event. They're the people who are the absolute most reliable people on your team. You have to make sure that your logistics team is reliable, and they have to be the ones who are like detail people. So, you know, if you have somebody who's maybe very energetic and has a lot of great ideas, but maybe can't always execute, logistics is not the place for that person. There are plenty of other great committees, but not logistics. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about how we've dealt with space. This is a sampling of all the spaces we had last time at PennApps. It's interesting because you can hold a hackathon in one space. Like I know Hack MIT did. They had one giant arena and they did all of their expos there, and they had one other auditorium space, but that was it. But we utilize several spaces all in the same area. We have our hacking space on the left, and up top we have our outside line spaces, our expo space, like the big science fair that we have. The middle is our auditorium, Irvine. Down below is our registration space and sleeping spaces. So these are all things you really have to consider when you're thinking about what is a good space for your hackathon. So, for example, last time we did all of our registration and all in the auditorium where we were having our opening ceremony, which is generally a good thing to do. It makes sense to have everything kind of in one place when people get there. But it ended up being kind of a huge mess because there wasn't a good place to like make form lines, and people were waiting outside and thinking to the next event, it's going to be winter, and we really don't want people standing outside for hours in the massive lines like you see up top in the winter. So we have to completely reconsider how we're doing space this time, or what spaces we're using, particularly for registration. Also with registration, the logistics of this, I think, is extremely crucial to your event because this is when people show up and this is their first impression. And for us, it ended up being kind of a logistical nightmare because I thought we had a solid plan, and it ended up that we didn't really have a really nailed down plan day of. So we were still figuring things out like hours before how we were going to do it. And we ended up just kind of trying to get people to come up to tables, and they couldn't really see which ones were open, and it was kind of a nightmare. So when you're thinking registration spaces, you need to make sure that you have either some kind of staggered registration, so not everyone's coming in at the same time and forming huge lines, or you need to make sure that you space things out and have appropriate signs so people know where to go, and your sponsors aren't wandering around wondering where they're supposed to be. Have a place for them, make it very clear where they're supposed to be. And make sure you have somebody on this who can really execute on the plans that you guys are making. Okay, so next going to talk about food. So there are two general strategies I've seen at hackathons for dealing with food. One is the catering strategy, where you just have a caterer come and deal with all your food the whole time, which is logistically a godsend. It's beautiful. These people just come in with trays and they know where they're going because they do the same thing for every meal, and it's a wonderful thing. But I actually have a lot of problem with caterers because they tend to be several times more expensive than the second strategy I'm going to discuss. And they also, I don't think the quality is not nearly as good. The way that we actually do it at PennApps is we avoid caterers as much as possible, and we negotiate deals with individual restaurants and try to get them to come and cater just one meal. And it's kind of logistically a bit of a nightmare because they come in, either we have to go get the food or they don't really know where they're going. But that can be resolved just by telling them where to go and giving them very clear directions. But the food is so much better. You have no idea. If we have a Thai restaurant come and do Thai food and an Indian restaurant come and do Indian food, and we have all of these different types of food for all of these different meals, and we get really good vegetarian options from all the different restaurants, it makes everybody happy, as opposed to having one caterer where they kind of do the same thing every time, and it's kind of like pasta and sandwiches and pizza and traditional hackathon food. So I'm a big proponent of this, but I leave it up to you what you guys want to do. Just wanted to present both strategies. So I wanted to talk for a minute about swag, because we've actually had some issues in the past, determining what swag to use. This is actually a sample of all the logos we looked at last time. We decided to completely change our logo and kind of rebrand ourselves. And we ended up having a 3-month email fight over which logos we liked better. The top is the old ones that we've been using for several years, and the bottom is just all the different ones we looked at in all the different styles. And it ended up just being a complete nightmare because everybody, you want a lot of different people on your team to give their input. So we just talked about this with the exec board, and everybody kind of has their own feelings since it's, swag and coloring and logos are very subjective. And it's really hard to make decisions about this. So you really need to think through how you want to go about making big decisions like this as an organizational team. One thing you probably want to do is set a deadline on when you actually decide things and then actually stick to it. And whatever the prevailing opinion at that time is, just go for it. We tend to do that until the very last minute, and then we order all of our stuff at a little bit past the very last minute. And it ends up being okay, but I really suggest that you guys, get all of this kind of stuff nailed down quickly and have somebody in charge who's decisive and can get everybody's opinions and make a decision on it. Side events. So at PennApps, we do something interesting in that we have all of our talks kind of the week before PennApps, and we let sponsors come and talk to Penn students. But we have fun side events at the actual hackathon. Maybe a talk or two, but in general, we try to do something cool and things that people would enjoy, like taking a break from hacking to do. Last year, we did ice skating. That was a lot of fun. I was in on that. We have also done things like Nerf gun fights. We do Quizzo most times. We're doing a lot of cool Valentine's Day themed stuff this time that I don't want to disclose yet. But this is something you may want to consider if you haven't thought about doing fun side events, or maybe minimizing the talks that you have during the event. I actually find that people don't like to attend the talks at our event. I think out of 1,100 people who attended PennApps last time, we had 8 people at one of the tech talks that we had during the event, which is pretty bad. So you may want to consider doing something fun. These are all very well attended, as long as they're well run and you advertise them well. All right, so I'm going to talk very briefly about crisis management. The idea here being when things go wrong at your hackathon, which they will. I'm sure you guys are all amazing, but something's going to go wrong. So you need to be prepared and know how to act in a crisis situation. So one crisis that happens pretty consistently at hackathons is the Wi-Fi goes down at some point. So for example, for us, our Wi-Fi worked really well throughout the weekend because we had people spread out throughout the complex that we have. But at the actual expo, we had the Wi-Fi completely go down and only Penn students can access it, and it was a nightmare. So I very highly recommend that you have lots of hard lines and Ethernet set up everywhere. Please take that to heart, like write it down if you think you're gonna forget it, because this is very crucial to running a hackathon. And then one thing that I like to call the Sunday morning crisis, which is kind of like an organizer problem, a problem with organizing organizers, which is that, you know, on Sunday morning, people, or if you have a 2-day hackathon, the first night, you know, everybody's got a lot of energy, they're all gonna stay up, they're all gonna have fun, and then everybody kind of falls asleep around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning because they just can't take it anymore. And I've actually been to several hackathons where none of the key people were awake around 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. So like there was a hackathon that I went to where I ended up actually running things, even though I was just attending as a hacker on Sunday morning because the entire team fell asleep. So you need to make sure that you have somebody awake. And even though we had plans at PennApps to have people awake, didn't happen. Make sure you have backup plans. And make sure that you implement your backup plans. Keep to them. And that's it. All right, thank you guys.